Hello everyone, and welcome to the members only live stream at the Northeast Georgia History Center. I am Marie Walker, and I am the director of the Ada Mae Ivester Education Center here. And today I am going to be showing you how to make Johnny cakes in a frying pan. I have a lot of different frying pans to show you. We have some different type of cornmeal that we are going to be using, and I will be making it over our fire here outside at the History Center behind our White Path cabin. Today I am dressed in a mid-1800s working woman's dress, very much like a lady might have worn who lived in the White Path cabin after the Cherokee removal in the mid-1800s. This recipe that I'm going to be making today was very much at use during this time period in the mid-1800s. It also goes all the way back a very, very long time because it's just such a simple recipe. They're called Johnny cakes, sometimes they're called corn cakes, sometimes they're called hoe cakes. They're pretty much all the same thing. They're basically a corn pancake. It is cornmeal ground in various ways and water. So if you were one of our wonderful viewers of the Music in the Mountains Family Day, you might have heard of hoe cakes in one of our songs. And we talked a little bit about that there, but for those who didn't get a chance to watch that, you can go back and watch it, but I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview now. So hoe cakes are, well, basically the same thing. They're Johnny cakes, they're corn pancakes, but they are made at the end of a hoe. Instead of using a frying pan, you would use a hoe, the gardening, farming instrument that you would just hold over a fire. Which, if you didn't have a frying pan, but you had a hoe, that would work for you. But it speaks very much to the humble origins of the hoe cake. This is going to be something that the lower class and middle classes are going to be eating. Upper class might eat them if they just like them. It's not something that's going to be a very large staple in their everyday diet. Corn is going to be much easier to grind than flour. Corn you don't have to grind as finely. You can kind of have chunks of it in there, and that's okay. With flour, you are going to have to take it to a mill. It's going to be ground very finely, and I have two types of cornmeal that I'm going to show you today. One is ground much more finely than the other. So today I'm going to be using Bob's Red Mill Yellow Corn Grits. So your corn grits, it's kind of not as finely ground corn because it's more gritty, but they perfectly fine to be used in hoe cakes. And then I also have Dixie Lily ground fresh daily in the Deep South since 1933. This is stone ground corn meal. So you're going to get to see the difference between the two. So first off, I'm going to put into my bowl the corn meal. All right. So you can see how nice and finely ground that is. So is going to be ground. This is ground at a very nice mill, has a very long history. And that is what that looks like. So that is some cornmeal. Now I'm going to put in the corn grits. You'll see that is ground much differently. Still very yellow. Far more gritty. And it depends on what mill you have, or if you're trying to do this yourself, as to what your Johnny cakes are going to look like in the 1800s. If it's going to be this more gritty corn-like substance, that's probably what it would look like if I took a mortar and pestle and ground it myself here at my home. And then you have this nice light powdery substance, which would take a mill powered by many animals or water. Usually they're going to be powered by water because it's just so much more forceful and you don't have to feed the water. So it's more of a plentiful resource and work product. But I like to kind of mix these two together because it gives what I would consider to be a nice authentic look. And more colorful, more of a interesting image there. All right, so now that I have mixed those two together, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add my water. So this is one of the dangers of cooking under a tree that they would have had back then as I'm having today, and that is you get leaves in your water. All right, now we're going to add it to the mix. All right. As you can tell, this is very scientific. I have been doing no measurements. I've just been kind of doing what I think is a good amount. All right, I added a little bit too much water. That's a little too runny. Oh, well, it's solid. It's soaking it up pretty good. I'm still going to add a little bit more cornmeal. All right, and now you see how it's crumbling here? That's not what you want dough to do. That means it's too dry. I added too much cornmeal. So I'm going to add a little bit more water. I like to start out with a smaller amount of cornmeal in the base of my bowl here, because I know that I'm going to have to repeat this process several times to get the exact right mixture that I want. And therefore, I'm going to keep adding just a little bit and a little bit until I get it to the consistency that I deem fit. But of course, that means you're adding more and more dough to your bowl. And I don't want to use too much. I don't want to be wasteful. This is a valuable resource for me and my imaginary family that lives in the cabin that I would want to be responsible for and conscious of. All right, there, that's to me looking like a pretty good consistency. It's still going to hold together, but it's also liquidy enough to where it can bake out and come together. All right, I'm going to mix that just a little bit more. All right. I think that's good. This is my smallest frying pan. Frying pans can come in all shapes and sizes, and I'm going to show some of them to you today. But this is my smallest one. This is what I call my personal sized frying pan. And it is a very, very small, nice circular shape. I like this one because if I am making something just for myself, then this is exactly what I need. If I'm going to just fry an egg, make a small breakfast, this is the perfect size for myself to do that for me. And if someone is traveling, this is not as heavy as some of the other frying pans because this is cast iron. It's solid. It's very heavy. It survives centuries. And if I'm going to be traveling, like many people in this era would be doing to different places, as in like on the Oregon Trail, the Santa Fe Trail, heading out west, on the move, if you are a soldier in the American Civil War, and you want to be able to carry a pan with you, you don't want to have a big, large frying pan because that's just so heavy. You don't want to have to carry that around with you. So a personal sized frying pan is probably your better choice. I can stick this in my sack and it's still heavy. It still has a good weight to it, but it's not going to be as cumbersome as a larger frying pan. So pancakes get their name basically because they are the shape of a pan, and they are cake-like, breaded. So this is probably the perfect size for a Johnnycake. It would fill up almost this entire pan, because it's almost the size of my palm, and that's about the size that you want a Johnnycake to be, or a pancake, even today. So I think this is where some of our modern standards of how large pancakes should be has come from. All right, now I have a slightly larger frying pan. This one is nice, and it's still fairly deep. It's a couple inches deep there, say about 1.5 inches deep. And it's a little larger. It is much heavier. This one, I believe, was popularized in the children's movie Tangled, in which she used it as a weapon. But I always get interesting comments about that when I talk about this on school tours, which is fun. But this one is a larger one. It's more of a slightly more of a family size, if you will. I am still not going to make 2 Johnnycakes in this one. I would just probably make 1, but it's a little bit larger. I can scoop it out easier, perhaps. But this one, it is deeper than this one. So if I am making some type of stirred dish rather than just making a cake or a pancake or something like that, this would be the better option for that. If I don't want to get out a whole big Dutch oven, but I still want to have something with sides, this would work. But also, again, if I don't want to get out the whole Dutch oven, but still want something with sides, well, here's this one. This is a very, very deep frying pan, and it has a lid. But this lid can also come off and be a griddle. Again, it's a very flat, this one I could almost get 2 Johnnycakes on, very shallow pan that I can just use to kind of set on top of the fire and use it almost like a grill top. And then this one is a very, very deep frying pan. So deep that I could almost use it like a Dutch oven because it does indeed have a lid. I mean, I could cook even something on top, but really that's where it's flat, so I can stack coals on top of there. But this one is very heavy, and like I'm having trouble like keeping it level here. It's so heavy. It's not something that you want to take on a trip with you or pack in your luggage. But I do like that this has the 2 pieces of it that goes with it. Now we've had the fire going for a little bit here, and I don't want to put it directly on top of the flames, but I want to put it on top of the coals, attempt to not get smoke in my eyes, and then I have my flipper to indeed flip it once it starts getting brown around the edges. So I've just kind of set it there, nestled on the edge of the fire. It's going to get a little bit of ash in there. That's okay. That's flavoring. Has a nice smoky flavor to it. I think everything cooked over a campfire tastes better because it has that smoky flavor to it. Like smoked meat, just in everything that's cooked over a campfire. It has that flavor to it. I might use salt to season the hoe cakes or to season the Johnnycakes, but I don't know. I'm going to see how they taste just on their own and then see if they need any salt. But you could season it to taste. I mean, if you wanted to add any types of different herbs or spices, I'm sure people did that to their liking. But this is the most basic form of a Johnnycake. So this is part of the fun of cooking over an open fire. The front portion here on the top of the pan is done. The back portion that wasn't as close to the fire is still kind of soft. So I'm going to have to set it in a position where the handle is a little bit closer, so it gets done a little bit. All right. Looks like it stiffened up a little bit. It just keeps shifting away from me. There we go. Whoops. The bad thing about the little pan is that it's hard to get under it with this. There we go. Let's see if we need cooked on that side. It's already pretty much done, so I'm not going to have to let it cook that much on that side. There's no egg or anything raw in here. I'm just kind of cooking it to make it glue together a little bit more. And it's always nice eating something warm. All right, so here is one Johnnycake that was made in our smallest container. It is nice and sturdy. There we are. There it is. It's nice and thick, very circular in shape. All right, but you can also tell it's kind of coarse. There's a definite texture to it. We're going to cook in our medium-sized pan. See if this does any better or worse. This one I can stick more evenly over the coals because it is longer and still has a nice long handle that I can pull it out with. So I think this one might cook better than the smaller one in this situation. Also, the fire has died down a little bit. That is a good thing because we want to cook over the coals anyway. All right, so this one's pretty much done. This one was a little bit bigger, so it was a little harder to flip. A little bit of the corner kind of pulled off. Ooh, I let this one cook a little bit more, so it's a little bit more crumbly. That's all right. That's all right. But here it is, the main portion. It has a lot of ash in it. There is a good amount of ash in this one. All right, I actually think the little one turned out a little bit better. All right. But of course, these little bits are still edible and they're yummy too, little nice and crunchy. Seeing how that one crumbled, I'm going to make sure this one is nice and wet going into the fire. And then there's leaves. All right. Going to go ahead and put this one on. I'm very interested in seeing this one because it is so much like a griddle. How this one fares. Now, Some people might just eat Johnny cakes as their entire meal, or hoe cakes or corn cakes, whatever your preferred name is for them. But sometimes you might pair this with other things. It could be a part of your meal. You might eat this with some fruits and vegetables. A lot of times when I think of breakfast, I think of fruit. So you might pair this with a fruit. If you wanted to put some applesauce or apple butter on the Johnny cakes, I really love apple butter or applesauce on Johnny cakes. I think that's really good. And it makes it more of a complete meal. You have some fruit in there, usually some yummy seasoned fruit with some cinnamon. Apples and cinnamon are so good. But of course, cinnamon is an expensive spice, so you may or may not have that. But yes, so you could put this with apple butter, applesauce. You might put some different types of jams or jellies on your Johnny cakes, very much like we do with pancakes. I would not think like a maple syrup would go well with these. I just personally do not think that pairs well taste-wise, but I'm sure people have eaten them with syrup. I just don't think cornmeal and maple syrup go well together, but I do think that different types of jams or jellies could go good with this texture and flavor. Most of the times, Johnny cakes can be eaten at any meal. A lot of times I think of them as a more traditional breakfast food just because they are like a pancake, which we eat for breakfast. It's a good, hearty, yet economical breakfast. And again, you could eat these for lunch and dinner, but at that point, I would think you would want to eat some sort of meat with that. Oh, that's another thing. You could eat some types of sausage with your Johnny cakes, or ham. Is another very traditional breakfast food. Have a slice of ham in your Johnny cakes with some fruit. That sounds like a great meal to me. All right. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and do it. I think it's now. It's okay. There we go. Broke off a little piece, but that's okay. All right. I think that's good. Ooh, nice and hot. There we go. So here we have Johnny cake number 3. Broke off a little bit, but that's okay. These are not the most cohesive of things. They have a very grainy texture. They're very flaky, which is nice in some textures, but when you're trying to bake them, it can be a little challenging. This one ended up having a lot of ash in it, but you know, it's seasoning. It's really, you just have to think of it as seasoning. I think when you're cooking over an open fire, but I think this one turned out very nicely, nice and thick. This side has a nice rounded quality to it, so I think that would go well for our meal. All right, I'm going to stick this one back here. The smallest one actually turned out best, which I thought would be the opposite of what happened. But maybe it's just because they got dried out more and more and I didn't add enough water. That could also be a reason. All right, I'm going to try a little piece. Ooh, nice and hot. It is nice and crisp. This one's one of the pieces from the one that I just made. It's nice and warm. Let's see. It's almost like chewy. This definitely needs salt. I think it would go really well with a stew too. Like one of those pieces of bread that you use to like sop up the gravy on potatoes or the broth of a stew. This is what you need, because it just like took all the moisture out of my mouth. But if you were going to soak this in something, I think that'd be really good. Now, if you wanted to make Johnny cakes a little bit more light and fluffy, I think you could add an egg. There's like a million different recipes, variations for Johnny cakes. This one was the absolute like basic bare bones, like I'm trying to survive and this will get me to the next day situation. But this is probably not what you're going to have in like a fine society that are also making corn pancakes. This is, I have corn and I have water and I want to live. Yeah, definitely needs salt or some type of seasoning. I would also just definitely recommend it being eaten with something else. Right now I just really want to like dunk this in like a nice stew. I feel like this would add to it. Almost like how we put crackers in stew today. This would act as a cracker as a cracker in the stew. Very well. The consistency that this is right now. All right. I'm going to drink water because that was very dry. Well, thank you everyone for joining me on this cooking experiment today. It seems that the smallest frying pan does indeed make the best Johnny cake, at least in terms of it being pretty and round and still held together. Now, I did experiment with some very bare bones Johnny cakes today. I'm not sure if I would recommend them unless you're trying to not starve, in which case they're a good option. But if you're trying to make a nice fancy Johnny cake, probably look for one that has a little bit more ingredients like an egg or some other types of seasoning in it that would make it more flavorful and more interesting to eat. But thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this interesting historical experiment. And until next time, stay safe and take care.